The moment my husband introduced me to his business partner, I noticed something strange. They looked at each other like they were sharing a secret I wasn't supposed to know. I ignored the feeling and smiled, believing it was just a successful partnership. But when I walked back from the restroom, I heard my husband say, "After tonight, everything will finally be easier." His partner laughed and replied, "She still has no idea, does she?" My heart stopped. They weren't talking about business. They were talking about me. And that was the moment I realized my entire marriage might have been a lie. My name is Emily Carter, and I was 31 years old when I learned that the person I trusted the most had been keeping a secret from me. Before that night, I believed I had the kind of marriage most people dreamed about. My husband, Daniel, and I had been together for 8 years. We had built a comfortable life, supported each other through difficult times, and celebrated every success like it belonged to both of us. When Daniel started his company 5 years earlier, I was there through everything. I remember the nights he stayed awake working on business plans, the weekends he spent answering emails, and the moments when he doubted himself. I was the person who reminded him that his dream was worth chasing. I never complained when work came first because I believed we were building a future together. So when Daniel told me he wanted me to meet his business partner, I was actually excited. "Tonight is important," he said while adjusting his suit in the mirror. "I want you to finally meet Michael." Honestly, none of this would have happened without him. I smiled because I loved seeing my husband proud of what he had achieved. I wore the dress he always complimented and prepared myself for an evening where I could finally meet the person who had helped him grow his company. The restaurant was elegant, filled with soft lighting, expensive decorations, and successful-looking people having quiet conversations. Daniel seemed more confident than usual, almost too confident. Then Michael arrived. At first, everything seemed normal. He was charming, polite, and exactly the kind of person I expected Daniel to work with. He shook my hand and smiled warmly. "So you're Emily," he said. "I've heard a lot about you." I laughed. "Hopefully good things." He smiled, but for a second, something about his expression felt strange. Like there was a conversation happening between him and Daniel that I wasn't part of. Throughout dinner, I noticed little things. The way they exchanged quick looks. The way they seemed to understand each other without speaking. Small details that I ignored because I trusted my husband. After dinner, I excused myself and walked toward the restroom. When I returned, I stopped before reaching the table. Daniel and Michael were talking quietly. I couldn't hear everything, but then I heard Daniel laugh and say something that made me freeze. "After tonight, everything will finally be easier." Michael smiled and replied, "She still doesn't know?" My heart dropped, because suddenly, I wasn't wondering what surprise my husband had planned. I was wondering what truth everyone knew except me. I didn't ask Daniel about what I heard that night. That was the hardest thing I had ever done. Every part of me wanted to walk back to that table, look him in the eyes, and demand an explanation. I wanted to ask him what he meant. I wanted to know why Michael believed I was the only person who didn't understand what was happening. But something inside me stopped. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the feeling that once I asked the question, there was no going back. So I smiled for the rest of the evening. I acted normal. I laughed at the right moments. I held my husband's hand while my mind was drowning in questions. On the drive home, Daniel talked about business deals and future plans, completely unaware that my entire view of him had changed. The next morning, I started paying attention. Not accusing, not assuming, just watching. And once I started looking closer, I noticed things I had ignored for months. Daniel had always been busy, but lately, his schedule had become impossible to understand. He took calls in another room. He turned his phone screen away whenever messages appeared. He had suddenly started caring more about his appearance before certain meetings. Things I once considered normal now felt different. I remembered all the nights he told me, "It's just work, Emily." I believed him, because I loved him. But now I wondered if work was just the excuse he used because he knew I would never question him. I decided not to confront him until I knew the truth. I started with small things. I looked through old calendars, business events, and public information about his company. At first, everything seemed normal. Meetings, conferences, client dinners. Then I noticed something. Michael's name kept appearing, again and again. At first, I told myself it was because they were business partners. Of course they would spend time together. But then I found something that made my stomach tighten. There were several private meetings that weren't listed as company events. Weekend trips that Daniel never mentioned. Expensive dinners at places where people didn't usually discuss business. They weren't just building a company together. They were building something else. The biggest shock came when I discovered documents hidden inside an old folder on Daniel's laptop. They weren't business reports. They were plans. Plans about expanding the company, changing ownership details, and making decisions that would affect our future. My name was nowhere. Not in the conversations. Not in the plans. Not even mentioned. That was the moment the pain became real. It wasn't just that Daniel had hidden something from me. It was that he had created an entire future where I didn't exist. I kept searching until I found the final piece of evidence. A message between Daniel and Michael. And after reading those words, I finally understood why they were so confident that night. They weren't hiding a business secret. They were hiding a life-changing decision they had already made without me. I stared at that message for what felt like hours. There it was in black and white. A conversation between Daniel and Michael about a future they had already planned. A future that didn't include me. They weren't discussing a simple business decision. They were discussing moving forward with a major expansion, changing ownership responsibilities, and creating a new arrangement that would completely change our lives. And the worst part? Daniel had written one sentence that hurt more than anything else. Once everything is finalized, telling Emily will be easier. Telling me, not including me, not discussing it with me. Telling me, like I was someone who needed permission to know about my own life. That night, when Daniel came home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse him. I simply watched him walk through the door, kiss me, and ask how my day was. For the first time in 8 years, I looked at my husband and saw someone I didn't recognize. The next evening, I finally decided it was time. Daniel, I said calmly, we need to talk about Michael. His expression changed immediately, just for a second. But I noticed. What about him? He asked. I placed my phone on the table with the messages open. The color disappeared from his face. Emily, where did you get that? That question told me everything. Not, what are you talking about? Not, this is a misunderstanding. Just shock that I knew. I spent years believing we were partners, I said. But apparently, I was the only one who thought that. Daniel tried to explain. He said he was protecting me. He said he didn't want to worry me with complicated business decisions. But I shook my head. Protection doesn't look like secrecy, Daniel. The room became silent. Because he knew I was right. The man I supported through every struggle had made plans behind my back. He had built success with my encouragement, but when the future became exciting, he decided I didn't deserve a place in it. That night changed everything. I didn't leave because I hated him. I left because I finally understood something important. A person who truly values you doesn't make you feel like a stranger in your own marriage. And the truth I discovered that night didn't destroy me. It gave me the courage to stop accepting a life where I was only included when it was convenient.